Do you ever feel like you're on a treadmill that just won't stop? In our modern world, slowing down seems like a crime. Society has trained us to believe that our value is directly linked to our productivity. We measure our days by the tasks we complete, our months by the projects we finish, and our years by the goals we achieve. And perhaps most importantly, we measure ourselves by how busy we appear to others. This relentless pace of life isn't just fast, it's unsustainable. From the moment we wake up until we collapse into bed, we are bombarded with a constant sense of urgency that leaves no room to simply pause. This hurry has become a cultural addiction. Being busy is now a status symbol, while calmness is seen as a sign of weakness or unimportance. But what if we've gotten it all wrong? What if the promise of fulfillment offered by the modern world through hyperproductivity and multitasking is actually a carefully laid trap? A race with no finish line where the only prize is exhaustion. This is the very idea that the philosophy of slow living dares to question. At first glance, slow living might sound like an invitation to be lazy, but it is actually one of the most courageous and conscious ways to live. Slow living isn't about doing less out of laziness, but about doing less out of wisdom. It's about reclaiming the dignity of our time so we can stop merely filling our days and start truly inhabiting each moment. We are at a turning point. The age of speed promised us efficiency but delivered alienation. It promised fulfillment but brought chronic anxiety, burnout, and an inability to be present. In running so much, we have become strangers to ourselves. In this context, slow living emerges not as a lifestyle trend, but as a deep psychological necessity, an invitation to remember that time is not just something to be optimized, but to be respected, savored, and lived with intention. From a very early age, we learn that our worth is directly linked to what we can produce. Children who get good grades are praised. Teenagers with packed schedules are seen as promising. Adults with tight deadlines and sleepless nights are celebrated as examples of success. This cult of productivity seeps into every sphere of modern life. The consequence is brutal. We begin to see ourselves as machines, measuring our self-esteem by the number of tasks completed. In this process, we lose something fundamental, the right to simply be. In a world that idolizes doing, resting or just contemplating is seen as wasteful. This logic creates an invisible prison where slowing down generates guilt. Any attempt to pause is invaded by thoughts like, I should be doing something useful right now. But who defined what is useful? The truth is, we have been taught that a well-lived life is a full life, full of tasks and achievements. And yet, how many of these things were truly chosen consciously? This is the central point of the slow living philosophy, to question the equation between productivity and personal value. It invites us to break away from the idea that we must earn our rest. This is a radical thought because it threatens the structure of contemporary society. But that is precisely why it is so necessary. Deep down, we all know that something is profoundly wrong with the way we live. Talking about slow living in a culture that idolizes haste is almost a subversive act. It's inevitable that reactions arise. That's for people with no responsibilities. It's a privilege for those who can afford not to rush. But these reactions say more about our collective mindset than about the concept itself. Slow living is not about laziness or unproductivity. It is the opposite. It is about reconnecting with life deeply, courageously, and intentionally. Living slowly doesn't mean doing everything in slow motion. It means doing what matters with mindfulness. It is about stepping out of automatic mode and entering conscious mode. It proposes a reversal of values. Instead of quantity, quality. Instead of accumulation, depth. Instead of haste, presence. This change requires an internal restructuring because we have been conditioned to believe that doing more is always better. For many, slowing down feels like giving up, but it is not giving up. It is a choice. It is choosing to do less, but to do it with soul. It is important to understand that slow living is not a rigid formula. It does not dictate the right pace because the right pace is the one that respects your own inner time. For some, this may mean reducing work hours. For others, It may simply mean starting the day without looking at the phone or reserving time for silence. The point is not in the form, but in the awareness. Living slowly is acting with intention. Long before the term slow living existed, a man had already withdrawn from the rush of the world to rediscover the value of time and essential living. His name was Henry David Thoreau. In 1845, he built a small cabin by Walden Pond and lived there for over 2 years, driven by a clear purpose to discover what it truly means to live. His book, Walden, is a manifesto against unnecessary speed and chronic distraction. "I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately," Thoreau wrote, "to front only the essential facts of life, and not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived." This powerful statement reveals his core philosophy. For Thoreau, living consciously required cutting away everything that was superfluous. He preached that simplicity was not a loss, it was a gain of freedom. By reducing his material needs, he increased his inner space. He observed his neighbors, all busy and tired, and famously wrote, "The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. And the scariest part, they didn't even realize it." For him, time was not something to be saved, but to be respected. "Time is but the stream I go a-fishing in," he said. Thoreau's wisdom reminds us that it is not enough to be alive biologically. We must be alive spiritually and emotionally, and for that we must live with intention. We live in a time when being busy is a virtue. We say we have no time as if it were a badge of honor, but there is a brutal difference between being busy and being alive. Constant busyness may feel like progress, but in reality, it is often just noise, a way to escape the discomfort of facing oneself. For many, being busy is an elegant disguise for an absence of purpose. We rush between tasks as if activity alone were justification enough to exist, forgetting to ask the important questions. Where am I going? Why am I doing this? To be truly alive is something different. It requires presence, depth, and courage. Because unlike busyness, which numbs us, presence reveals. It reveals discomfort, but it also reveals a beauty that only shows itself to those who slow down enough to see it. To inhabit time means to be present where you are. It is not about literal slowness, but about intention, fully surrendering to a conversation, a meal, or a walk without rushing to the next thing. Here lies the most fascinating paradox of slow living. When we slow down, we experience more. When we stop chasing life, we find life. Not in future promises, but in the now, waiting for our presence. Most people believe that living slowly is a luxury, but this view reveals how immersed we are in a sick logic where one can only rest after exhaustion. The truth is that slow living is not a whim, it is an urgent form of psychic resistance. It is a defense of the soul against a system that profits from our haste and distraction. In this scenario, living with presence and intention is a form of disobedience. It is saying no to a world that demands speed at any cost. It is rejecting haste as the only possible path. It is claiming the right to feel, to savor, and to be at peace. Slow living is an invitation to integrity, to reconnect with what speed robs us of, our connection with our bodies, emotion, ends, nature, others, and ourselves. It is an attempt to escape a superficial life and reclaim an existence with depth. In a world where everything is quantified, likes, followers, goals, the question we almost never ask is, what is the true criterion of a well-lived life? The philosophy of slow living forces us to reevaluate this. It suggests that perhaps the true measure of a fulfilling life is not in the quantity of experiences, but in the depth with which we inhabit them. Living with intention is an act of lucidity. It is realizing that the great moments of life often do not shout, they whisper, and we only hear them when we silence the noise of haste. Slow living reminds us that we are not here just to fulfill a function, but to experience existence. Deep down, what slow living proposes is a reconnection with what is essential: time, silence, others, and the now. It does not promise a life without pain, but a life with more truth, a less hurried, less automatic existence. A life in which we finally stop running after life and start, in fact, to live it. If you've made it this far, perhaps something inside you already knows it's time to change the pace. Perhaps a part of you is asking for less noise, less speed, and more presence, more soul, more life. If this video touched you, leave a comment saying, "It's time to slow down," and join the journey out of haste and into presence.